I'm Dr. George Flynn, and welcome to In-Depth TV. I've been asked by so many people, what is your story? And so many people out there have a story. And they keep saying to me, what is your story? Because we usually focus on other people. And I decided, okay, I'll give you my story. I was born in Savannah, Georgia. My father and mother from Memphis area. And what were we doing in Savannah? He was in the Corps of Engineers during World War II. And so I was born in Savannah, Georgia, and they moved me and moved them back to Memphis when I was about 2 years old. So I don't remember much about living in Savannah. I do remember going to Tybee Beach. At age 2, I didn't remember much. I do remember having a red bathing suit. But what memories at age 2, what really affects you, I don't know. But I kind of grew up in the eastern part of Memphis. In East Memphis back then was around Greer Street and Central, and between Southern and Central, and near East High School, in between East High and Messick High School. So I grew up. And I enjoyed, it was so safe back then. I would go back and forth on my tricycle. I guess I was 4 or 5 years old. I would get up early and just go out of the house and drive. There was nothing to it. Everybody was safe, and we'd just ride up and down the street with tricycles. I had several friends, and we would just race up and down and just ride up and down. I don't know what the reason was, but just to get out and get some exercise. And we would do that very early in the morning, probably all day until I started school. And it was a fun time. It was a safe time. And you remember that safety in your life, and that safety that you had, and you thought you may have had a care or two in the world, but you really didn't. You were taken care of. And same way, there was no drama, no trauma. It was all pretty much a safe environment in which to grow up. And so I did, and then I started school, went to East High School, and did okay in East High, just kind of blended in with everyone. Had some great people in our class. And I went there from the 1st grade until the 9th grade. And the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades, I went to Central High. But we'll get to that in just a minute. But at East High, it was the formative years were there. And the big formative years, like everyone else, was the 6th, 7th, and maybe some of the 8th grade. But the 6th and 7th grades were the real formative years back then. Now the formative years are the 5th and 6th grades maybe, and everybody's maturing earlier. And there's not that real protection of the first decade of life. People are exposed to so many more things, so much more culture, so much more in the way of adult entertainment on the internet, online. Children are not generally protected now. And I find that to be a little bit sad. I think children should have that first decade of life being innocent, carefree, and being able to express themselves with their talents, whether it's art, whether it's math, whether it's sports, whatever it is. Children should be protected and be able to have their life and have it known that they are cared for, and that they can have this first part of their life and enjoy it and not get so caught up in the drama of everyday life. You got plenty of time to do that later in life, but not just first thing, as you're growing up. So as we grow up, we learn more and more. And then after East High School, why did I go to Central High? My father went to Central High School, and I went to East High, and then he suggested that I go to Central High, and he would get me a car if I'd go to Central High. So I did go, and the reason he had was that I would have the same teachers my father had at Central High. That's the kind of teachers we had. They were career teachers. They taught generations of families. So I went to Central High, and I'll never forget having a little bit of a problem with a geometry concept. Had a lady named Laura Mosey, and she was a math teacher. And she came by the desk one time. She saw I was having a problem. She said, your father had that same kind of problem with that same kind of concept. And I thought, my goodness, she could remember that. And I thought it was great that I was following in those footsteps. And I worked hard and made good grades, made a lot of friends. A lot of us have kind of kept in touch. And the beauty, I'll take a little sidetrack here, we've got a radio station, Sunny 103, and it's AM 1210, 1210 on the AM dial, or 103.1 on the FM dial. In eastern Arkansas, it's 103.9. And online, it's online also, Sunny, SUNNY1210.com. And people listen to it in Canada and all over the world, and in Germany, and we'll get calls from everywhere, but primarily Memphis, Arkansas, Mississippi, some Alabama, some Florida. So we get calls, and people talk about growing up, where they grew up, how they grew up, some of the memories they had growing up, especially memories about growing up in Memphis area, in the Memphis or Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi. We all basically had the same ideas growing up. A lot of the Elvis Presley stories come out, and the concept of the show, and that's the reason I can talk about this growing up, is it talks about growing up. What happened to us? The first date, the first car we had, our first teachers, the first grade, and it's not all talk. It's music of the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. And it's music that a certain generation grew up with, but it's stories about them. So in between the music, we have stories about growing up, and they're not just my stories. I'm the host of it, but I bring in people and they tell about their lives. And that's what's so interesting. They tell about their lives and about what happened with them, what happened with their father and grandfather. And it brings a continuity of life to people, and they're able to have those memories and share those memories. And that's what I'm doing with you right now, sharing those memories. But if you like this, I would love to interview you. Contact me. We'll interview you. You can share the memories, because sharing those memories helps you remember more and helps you figure out, what went on in your life, what happened. Well, anyway, we'll get back to Central High School. I went to Central High and enjoyed it, had a great time, had a lot of learning experiences. And then decided that I was going to become an engineer like my father was, and went to engineering school, studied electrical engineering. At the end of my electrical engineering training, we had to do a thesis, and I did one on radiation coming from the front of TV sets, television sets. Back then, there were no flat screens. It was all cathode ray tubes, and it would send out enough energy to cause a little bit of radiation from the TV set. Well, I found out it was very little radiation. It was not much at all. And it mostly came out of the top of the TV set. So there's no worry there. But I started studying this, and I got in touch with some radiologists. And so they said, yeah, here's what the way radiation works. And I got very interested in it. I said, I want to be a radiologist. And they said, oh, sure, go ahead. And they said, you got to go to medical school. I said, oh, no, I didn't know that. So I did. I went to medical school. And as a matter of fact, the first day of medical school, I punched this guy next to me, and it had College of and blank. I said, how do you spell medicine? And he said, you're not going to be here very long, are you? But I made it through medical school and did well, and then graduated. And I was very taken with the art and the science and the practice of medicine. It became the highlight, the focus of life for me. And so I did my internship at Barnes Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri. And then I did a radiology residency in Memphis. And the Vietnam War was going on, so I joined what's called the Berry Plan, where they guaranteed that you would go in to the service, but they would defer your entry into the service until you had finished your residency. Because at that time, they were taking you out of your training, putting you into the service, and then you'd have to come back and finish your training. So I was somehow selected, one of the 4 people in the country to go that year to the National Institutes of Health. And when I was at National Institutes of Health, it was a wonderful learning experience, and we got to treat patients with very exotic diseases. And it's a fine institution. And so they said, what would you like to do? We're going to teach parathyroid venous sampling, we're going to teach lymphangiography, and we're going to teach spinal cord angiography and ultrasound. I said, I think I like this ultrasound thing. And so I did. And funny enough is the ultrasound machine was based on the same oscilloscope that I used in engineering school. So I knew my way backwards and forwards around that oscilloscope. I knew how to operate that oscilloscope and could operate the ultrasound machine. And therefore, I learned ultrasound, and it was just in the beginning of ultrasound. Learned it from the greats, the absolute greats. And it was very rudimentary back then, but I've seen it progress and progress till the state of the art that it is now. So after I finished my tour of duty at NIH, or National Institutes of Health, came back to Memphis, started my radiology practice, focusing on ultrasound. And that's the story. And I've got part 2 of the story coming up real soon about how I got into the radio and TV business. I hope you'll stay tuned. Let me know your stories. We'd love to have you on telling your stories also. And you can give us a call, 901-483-7000. Let us know your stories if you'd like to be on TV with us. I'm George Flynn. Thank you for watching. See you next time.